and the race to 10 may not be enough either. So we'll see how that whole thing works out. But before we get much further into the broadcast, I want to thank our sponsors. Obviously, I want to thank, Code Rum. If you guys come to our tailgates, and I want to instantiate something tonight. I know, hey, there's Cheryl right there. I think she's tuning in on her phone. Glad that Cheryl's in the chat room. She's working with some of the folks over at One Voice tonight, I believe. But thank you for tuning in. If you don't know who Cheryl is or Spent, you guys haven't been here long enough and you need to learn. She heads up our What the Buck Really Matters charitable organization and does about a bajillion other things as well. And one of the things that she usually does is she usually coordinates our drink words. I have a tendency, as you may have noticed, and if you're a longtime podcast listener, first of all, thank you. And if you've given me a review on iTunes, thank you for that as well. But I have a tendency to get a little bit free with my language at times on the podcast. It's one of the probably 30 reasons why no one gives a shit about this podcast but us. But sometimes we have drink words. And what I'd like to do moving forward is make sure that those drink words, at least for the rest of the season, hopefully if Code Rum decides to stay with us in next year, are now, from this day forth until that point, known as the Code Rum drink words. So if we have a drink word or an idea for a drink word, drop it in the chat room. And if I say that, that means have your drink. I will have my drink as well whenever that happens. I also want to send a big shout out to Elder Ford of Tampa and Steakhouse Elite. These guys have been with us now for years. They're always with us, and we appreciate that support. The guys at Steakhouse Elite are freaking phenomenal, and so are the guys at Elder Ford. We wouldn't be able to do the things we do without them. The people that we pay attention to, we always remind you of these folks because we think it's kind of important. I know my man, Rick Brown, downtown Rick Brown, Slick Rick, had a big article over on ESPN.com, so big shout out to Rick Brown about playoff chances, and he went ahead and outlined the rest of the games. So we put that up on the What the Buck Facebook wall. Make sure you get a look at that. And it looks like SAC is going to be the Code Rum drink word of the night. One of the probably 30 reasons why no one gives a shit about this podcast. It looks like SAC is going to be the drink word of the night. Sorry about the repeat if you heard that echo coming across here. But Rick Brown's article on the playoffs, big shout out to him. You know that we pay a lot of attention to Pewter Report, JoeBucksFan.com, Bucks Brief, specifically Sandra P. What he does on his side as well, Bucks Nation. The one that we've been whoring out to a certain degree is I think Chris over at BucksBrief.com is doing an absolutely tremendous job. Commission Online does a great job as well. You got some tremendous content out there as Bucks fans, so make sure if you're not supporting that content or haven't supported it yet, get out there and support that content because that really does round out, I think, and that's not just a fat joke for me, what you guys get a chance to have access to with regards to content because not everyone wants the same kind of content. And I saw, who was it? It was Stephen Holder, who used to be a writer down here. You guys probably remember him. St. Pete Times, I believe. Good writer. He writes up in Detroit now, or Indy, rather. And he made a comment on Twitter that I retweeted, which was essentially press conferences were never meant for mass consumption. They were meant to go to media people who then chop them up and do other stuff with them. Now, yeah, definitely. Thank you, Cheryl, in the chat room. The other person who you know that we always pay attention to, we usually have him on the show. He's been very busy as of late for good reasons, is Steve White, SGW. SGW94 on Twitter. His breakdowns are phenomenal as well, so make sure you follow him up. But anyway, the press conferences have been something that everyone is watching now. We have so much access; it's 24/7. Every channel, every radio is trying to give us as much content as possible. So keep that in mind when you get tired of people saying the same thing. This isn't normally supposed to be, or it hasn't been in the past anyway, dog and pony show. Now. Tailgates, watch parties. Big shout out to the Bucks. We went to the road rally last week over at $5 Drinkery. For all you guys who came out and supported that was great. We had a tremendous time in the back room. We had a big crowd. A big crowd that was very excited in the first half. My man Jay Buck was leading the cheering. Matt Bucknuts wasn't able to be there, so he took over and was doing the cheering. We had the good lead going into halftime. Did some periscoping from the event. Also threw that up on YouTube. And then the second half happened, and this game really was, and we'll get into that a little bit with Sean when he calls in. It was the game of two halves. If you look at the stats and the way things happened, you got 94 yards on the ground. Doug Martin running like a beast in the first half. We eke out a lead at the half. We're going to get the ball after halftime. It's almost like we had things set up exactly the way we wanted it. And then we came out and shit the bed on the first possession and then started off a third quarter and the beginning of a fourth quarter that was just absolutely miserable. It's like we didn't remember how to play football. And going and evaluating why that was and what the Colts did and how they were able to do that to our team is going to be the key and critical piece moving forward against the Atlanta Falcons, who we have beaten once on their home field. That doesn't mean shit, guys. We can pretend it does, but it doesn't. And if I had to prove it to you, I can do it this way very easily. The Atlanta Falcons had a players-only meeting today. Dun, dun, dun. Or yesterday, sometime this week. I don't know. They had a meeting that they didn't let coaches into. And I would like to point out for all of the folks who were and yeah, you know what? I'm not going to even apologize for this. I took shots at all the fire lovey guys because I think you guys are fucking morons when it comes to this particular thing. You may be brilliant in your real world. I don't know. But pointing at Atlanta's head coach as the example, see, we need to get him. We need to get him. And now that team is falling apart, guys. Where the fuck have all you guys been talking about what a goddamn football savant he is? Where is that? Right? Where is the higher Chip Kelly crowd? Where did you guys go? Did you guys disappear? Now, I know I'm screaming at the wrong people here in the chat room who listen live, but maybe you folks in the podcast can respond back. Respond back on Twitter at WhatTheBuc, because I want to know where all you motherfuckers went who were saying fire Lovey, hire Chip Kelly, or why don't we go after Quinn and all that other stuff, you know? So anyway, enough of my vitriol about that. The watch party was a lot of fun. Most important, including Pewter Report, absolutely.
What's this? A box. I think it's worn out things to make it better.
It's our biggest breakthrough yet. We're taking worn out batteries and making them into something strong. Energizer Eco Advance, world's first long-lasting battery made with 4% recycled batteries.
With the Samsung Radiant 360, music reaches your ears the same way no matter where you are in the room. So if the music always goes your way, it leaves one to wonder what else might. The Samsung Radiant 360. Live in the sweet spot.
Screw this up. We do a drive at every one of our tailgates. Our tailgates are donation driven. What was I going to say? I lost my train of thought entirely looking at the chat room. I don't believe we're collecting toys anymore. I think it may be our last one for toys. If not, it is going to be bikes for Alex's Christmas for Kids. But Cheryl will talk about that in the chat room, and then I will recite that as well. As always, donation driven. If you're going to eat, it's usually a recommended $10. If you're going to eat and drink, we recommend 20. But please do give till it hurts. We were able to generate over $2,400 for Movember last month, which was amazing. So we will make sure it is toys. And we will make sure that you guys know what's going on with that as well. We have a great time. The ship will be there in full effect. You're going to wear your white Craig Erickson jersey. Hey, listen, Christopher. That's Christopher Oxentine in the chat room. The white throwbacks are fire. I want a white throwback so goddamn bad it hurts. And you just don't see them. I used to love the white on white. The original Color Rush. They can eat a dick, Nike. The white on white throwbacks when we used to play Detroit in the Silverdome and they had that damn indoor-outdoor green carpet on a standard definition rabbit ear television. Boy, that was that hot fire, if you ask me. The proceeds from this month's tailgate will be going to Alex's Christmas for Kids. If you don't know the story behind Alex's Christmas for Kids, please do go check it out. Maybe Cheryl will drop the link in the chat room for us. It is an amazing story, an amazing local story. Sadly, an amazing story that took a sad turn last year when we lost Alex, but his family continues the legacy of what he started to provide kids in the area, a very visceral, informative Christmas experience, that first Christmas where you get that bike, that sort of big kid's bike that you would always hope to have. It touched us pretty significantly, and so we've tried to continue to support them as much as we can, and we'll continue to do so as long as we're doing our tailgates. So, and I do have a white throwback from you, Cheryl, but it will not fit my fat ass well enough to wear. So I have to lose, like, I don't know, 1,000 pounds or something. But at any rate, when Sean calls in, we'll talk to him. I want to start talking a little bit here about what I saw last week. My predictions I mentioned, I thought Martin would do well. He could have done even better had we actually given him the ball. A big shout out to Oversell Podcast, by the way, and all of our chatters over there. Guests, hopefully you guys are able to get registered and get names so I know who you are. I apologize I can't call you by names. I got a couple of folks who I can, though. Oversell Podcast is wrestling podcast and all the things they do over there. Tremendous work. I don't give him enough shout outs because he sure as hell supports us. So any one of you guys over there, Rev Fish, the whole crew that are in the chat room, I appreciate that. I mentioned my comment about Alteron Werner. That makes me sad that he did not have the game we wanted. But in general, coverage, and we'll talk about that as an overarching theme throughout the broadcast, I suspect, tonight, kind of let us down a little bit. You had a 40-year-old quarterback who was using, I think, a Lark scooter, and he was somehow able to still pull off a win against us. Now, this will, of course, elicit the crowds, the throng, to say that we can't beat backup quarterbacks. That's not necessarily true. what it came down to is if you give a good seasoned quarterback time and you don't get your depth at the linebacker position and you're not playing appropriate depth at the corner, he's going to hit guys who look wide the fuck open. And that is, in fact, what he did. And he did it well enough to notch a win over our beloved Buccaneers, which made me very, very, very sad. Now, last week we talked about the defense was starting to get it, and it certainly looked like they were. This week, though we eliminated entirely the rushing game, our coverage was absolutely terrible. There was nothing that we seemed to be able to do. Lovey pointed out we did not get a turnover. We did have the strip that didn't get a chance to happen because of the phantom holding call. But at the same time, we have got to be able to create those turnovers. Now, it's not for lack of trying. The team came out, I thought they were hitting well early in the first half. Some folks thought we came in there riding a little bit high. I don't know that that's the case. I do know that this is another one of those games you're going to look back on and go, damn it, there's no freaking way that we should have lost this game. Buckshot in the chat room points out 2 100-yard receivers. And Revfish, I don't know why Banks has fallen so far down. Now, let's be a little bit careful we're not reactionary with regards to the corners, right? Because the week before we were singing the praise of the corners. The corners being able to get up and play press allowed us to do some things for pressure, which allowed our defense to do some more, creative things to try and get those turnovers. Now, whether we were afraid of doing that or what this week, I'm not sure. When they had the opportunities, they couldn't do it. The drive that led to the touchdown late in the game that got Indy propelled, not the out in front of 28, whose name I can't remember because I'm apparently just tired. But against Sterling Moore, they're running the same damn route as essentially a lazy fly or a fade. And it's simply to go to the corner and force the safety to come over, and the safety just never showed up. McDougal, I think it was in both occasions. It's the same goddamn route back to back, and there's just no excuse to have that happen. There's absolutely no reason that should happen. Banks isn't an option that anyone should be forced into, says Buckshot. Listen, I don't understand why everyone's so mad at Banks. I thought Banks, when he does get a chance to play, plays fairly well. I don't know why he has been cast into the E.J. Biggers role so fast, but maybe, who knows. Scooter and backup QB are both drink words. I like it. I like Scooter. And those are Code Rum drink words, by the way, because I definitely want those guys. I got to admit, we have not given Code Rum enough press this season, and we need to try and do some more, because if you haven't had it, it's very good stuff, and those guys stepped up in a big, big way. It wasn't 28. Who the hell was it? It wasn't Baja Majamija, was it? When I was watching the replay, it looked like 28. You know the play I'm talking about, right, Kurt? If you could find out who that is, I'd appreciate it, man, because I don't like being wrong. I mean, it certainly happens. So an Oversell podcast talks about the slant being the Bucs' kryptonite. Listen, the slant is not. There's nothing magical about the slant. If you watch other teams play this game, depending on the defense you're in, the slant is a particularly good route to run. It's quick acting. If your quarterback can get his feet set or at least arm the ball through, get a passing lane, it's very tough to defense. There's a couple of ways to defense the slant. And I'm going to message. I gave Sean all this credit for being on time, and here he is late. I'm going to message him real quick. You can go press. It was Jude. Okay. You can go press, especially if you go inside shade and just not let him get there. Right? He's got to get across your face or go to the outside. The other thing you can do is you can rotate coverage. You can rotate one of your linebackers into that slant zone and try and trap a quarterback. You can drop a defensive end in a zone dog or a zone blitz and just get into that zone to try and create a really tough pass. There's ways to do it. I don't know why it is that our defensive coordinator, who in this case, while it may be named Leslie Frazier, the guy making the plays is Lovie Smith, and we know that, why he doesn't seem to give a shit about them throwing it. Now, all of that said, had our offense been able to convert and stop getting field goals or missing field goals, get touchdowns, the phantom hold on the Doug Martin run, is a perfect example, but none of this would matter, right? Now, you still want to clean these up, and I've said this for weeks. Fuck, I've said it for years. Until you are good enough to start worrying more about the other team, you should just worry about yourself. Right now, we're not doing things well enough to be overly preoccupied with what the hell that other team's going to do. Now, game planning is always an aspect, no doubt about it. But when it comes down to this sort of stuff, the basics of the football game, you have got to get your job done. So we just did not do that. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the penalty situation while we give Sean a chance to make his phone call in. Penalties are obviously something that people are going to be upset about. 12 penalties this week for 95 yards, some at particularly bad times as well. The interesting piece to this is if you start looking at trends of what kind of penalties we have committed over the year. And it won't come as any surprise, probably. What penalty do you think we lead in throughout the year? Revfish says, as a discussion, the problem is that we are shading inside, which gives a natural opening to the seam and slant. Our linebackers aren't getting back. No, so I would disagree with that, Revfish. I'll go back and look at the all 22. If we were shading inside from the corner position, then that wouldn't give the release to the seam, right? That would actually make it tougher because they have to go over the top. That makes it much more complicated. We tend to, at very best, be head up, which I don't necessarily have a problem with, but we're rarely in press at all. Even in red zone, we don't get very aggressive, which is strange. We're not very physical, which doesn't make any sense. So we got a couple people guessing on what we lead throughout the year. I'll tell you that throughout the entire season, the penalties are going to be the ones you should guess. Buckshot says defensive offsides. We got oversell with false start. The question at bay is, what is our number one penalty, the number one penalty that we are committing this season? And I'll tell you the number two as well because it's gonna paint the picture that I want to paint. As we wait for some more of those guesses to come in, the number one penalty with 22 is offensive holding. Brian Shooker is right. 22 of them. League average is 15.5. We are 6.5 worse than the league average. 212 yards to offensive holding. The second penalty is false start. So of our total number of penalties, which is a pretty significant number, right? And I can get you the total number. But of the total, 40 are on the offensive line, more or less. Now, the false starts may actually not just be on the offensive line. Let me see who they were on. That's not going to give me the by player. I can get by player, though. It's not personal foul, guys. Gosser Cherilus leads the team with 10 penalties. Logan Mankins with 8. Jacques Smith with 7. 2 neutral zone infractions, 2 defensive offsides, illegal use of the hands. Ali Marpet, Donovan Smith, Mike Evans, offensive PI, obviously. There we go. Is this the one, the only Sean King?
Hey, man, I had fell asleep, man. Tell him I'm so sorry.
Man, I'll tell you, your fan base out there is crying about it. I gave you all this credit. I said, listen, we got to be ready for Sean because he's a professional. He'll probably call in on time. Anyway, welcome to the show. I ain't gonna tell him nothing. You on here now? You're live. We go straight to air here. We're not those pussies that work behind a mic in the real radio world.
Okay.
Yeah, you're live. You're live. Don't worry about it. So Sean King here. You guys know him. You're Bucs fans. You know who Sean is. One of the things I always loved in the brief moments I got a chance to work in quote unquote real radio was, and I've told people this off the record before, Sean, no one I worked with was ever more prepared than Sean. He always had his data. You may not have liked what Sean said, but you damn well better respect it because he had data behind it. So, Sean, you're not just an analyst. You're not just a former player. You're a local product, and you're a Bucs fan at heart in many ways. What do you see in this Bucs team that maybe other fans wouldn't see because of your experience?
First of all, let me apologize. I got my son. He's 11 months. He's laying next to me, so if he starts crying, I apologize.
No, that's fine. He probably watched the game, too.
I think what you have to do is understand that they're a group that's evolving. You know, you look at the recent history for the veterans, we haven't been very successful here. You know, it's been kind of a disappointment. If you look at the young guys, the rookies, you know, the second year, they lack experience. So we're a team that's figuring out, first of all, how good we are, and secondly, we're trying to figure out what it takes to win week in and week out in this league. So if you think back to when we were really good, you know, when we had the Derek Brookses and the Warren Sapps, think about their first 3, I think it was maybe 3 years. You know, they were learning to become who they are, who they actually became. Lynch was trying.
If you misplace your Discover card, you can use Freeze It to prevent new purchases on your account in seconds. And once you find it, you can switch it right on again. You're back! Freeze It, only from Discover. Get it at discover.com.
but we're still a work in progress.
Okay. So with that being said, and over the past couple of years, there have been times where you didn't have that kind of attitude. You were very frustrated, very angry with the direction, whether it be the coaching or the actual players on the field.
Yep.
What's your assessment right now of our offense? Something that a lot of fans have been very excited about, something you should know a whole shit ton about. What's your assessment of our offense? Where's our strength? Where's our weakness? And what do you want to see improve versus Atlanta this week?
Well, I think the main thing is we got a quarterback. And I think, that's such a hard thing to find. When you find one, it really, gives the fan base hope, But we also have two very good young offensive linemen, who just think that we're sitting here 5 and 6 with a chance to be in the playoffs and we're starting a rookie quarterback and two rookie linemen. I mean, that's pretty outstanding if you ask me.
Right.
Considering that, we've had a lot of injuries on offense, we still found a way to, continue to try and get better and win football games at the same time. So I think the mental toughness that they've displayed this year is something that will carry us, moving into the future. I would say this, I think one of the objectives this offseason, at least offensively, is to get a little more athletic. Right now I think we're an offense that really is blue collar. We have to grind it out. We don't get chunk plays, big yardage plays that often. I think we got to go into the off season, trying to get a little more athletic. Get an Antonio Brown, a DeAndre Hopkins. Most elite, transcendent talent. Where it makes it a little easier when you got a guy like that.
So it's interesting, and I'm just going by anecdotal data here, Sean, because I've watched the Bucs since I was old enough to watch TV, and I've seen a lot more chunks. And now, admittedly, we always get run down. Like I don't see us on a chunk play, whether it's Doug Martin getting run down, or Mike Evans getting run down, or Vince Evans getting run down. We don't have a single cat on this team that's going to run away from anybody. Apparently, is that what you're referring to? Because I actually see us getting a lot more yards per play than I've ever seen this offense do.
Yeah, I should have been more specific. That's what I meant.
Okay, I got you. No, that's fine.
guys that not only can make people miss in tight spots, but guys that have, the ability to
take it to the house.
Really house call it. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's funny because I was watching some of the stuff before the show, and NFL Network, I think it was, it was NFL Network. They were showing the 54-ish yard run, the long run that Doug had right before halftime, and before we decided we don't need to run with Doug Martin anymore for some inexplicable reason. And he's looking straight down, and they made a comment that he said he got caught looking at the Jumbotron on the long run the week before, and he sure as hell wasn't looking at the Jumbotron. He was staring down at the ground, and he got run down. And listen, hey, I'm fat. I can't outrun nobody either, but at some point I feel bad for Dougie because he does all the hard shit, and then he just can't run faster than everybody.
And I think that it's so evident that it's kind of like an Achilles heel for all our guys.
Yeah.
Like, I remember Vincent Jackson.
Oh, God.
What was it, 2 years ago getting ran down by the
3-yard line.
The Saints?
Yeah.
So, I mean, and as good as Mike Evans, projects in a lot of things, top end speed and really his, elite trait. So we got to get a little better in that area. But, it's not hard to find those kind of guys when you have good football players in other places.
Well, now let's talk a little bit about Mike Evans because we're here. You're a former quarterback. You got a lot of information about receivers. I am one of those guys who I love the potential Mike has. I know he's had big games. He's had games where there's big gaudy numbers. If you don't look at the drops, they look amazing. But if you look at the drops, you go, "What the hell happened?" What are we seeing in Mike Evans? Have you seen this before by any of the receivers you may have played or been around in your time playing? And what can he do to try and not drop critical passes at critical times, even when he doesn't have gloves or rain to blame?
Well, I'm hoping it's a concentration thing and not a skill thing. A lot of times, with young receivers, we think we know what they are, who they are.
Right.
But they're still developing. And I think I tweeted out, I thought it was a sophomore slump initially, I'm beginning to be more concerned, and hopefully it's something that he can overcome, because, to be an elite receiver, there's a word that comes to mind when you deal with whatever quarterback you have, and that's trust.
Right.
And your quarterback can't trust you if, first of all, you don't catch the ball consistently, and secondly, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it seems that him and Jameis haven't been on the same page as much as they should be. A couple balls where, Jameis sees him in one-on-one coverage. He thinks he's going to, be the primary guy. And Mike kind of seems to be just kind of running off, And I don't know if he's, dreaming about Johnny Manziel or what, but, maybe Jameis can start doing the money sign or something. But, we got to get those guys on the same page because in this league, old school, every missed opportunity matters. Because they're hard to come by. So every time that we drop a big play or aren't on the same page on a potential big play, that's game changing.
Absolutely. And it's funny because, like, I normally think from a receiver's perspective, the only thing they really care about is targets, right? If you're going to let me try and eat, then I'm okay with you. You're going to get me the chance to go ahead and put up my numbers, meet my escalators, do the things I need to do to get my contract. As long as you're throwing a catchable ball, I'm happy with you. And you can't say Jameis isn't targeting him because he sure as hell seems to be. But I like you said, we've got to figure out what the problem is because it's starting to become pretty upsetting to see the percentage of drops now in the running game. And this is something you were beneficiary of when you were our quarterback, right? We had work done. We had some guys who could really move the ball on the ground. This is a team that has the ability to run like we haven't seen in a long time. But we also have this two-headed beast. What's your thought about the two-headed beast situation that we have now, like we had back in your day? And what would you like to see us doing from a staffing perspective with regards to play balance between Doug Martin and Sims?
Well, I like when the team, depends on their run game because running the football is a mindset. One of the things I think kind of hurts teams is when the quarterback always tries to get you in the perfect play.
Mm-hmm.
For us, it was never about being in the right play. It was about executing the play called. So, like, when I called a play in the huddle, the guys, we might not have the numbers advantage every time. We might not have the alignment advantage, but we went to the line of scrimmage with the mindset that we're going to make this play work anyway. And I think teams that feel like that are teams that consistently run the ball well. As far as the two-headed monster, I like it. I love it. I think both guys are talented. I think, both guys are motivated. Doug's playing for, what he hopes is a big contract. Charles is, trying to prove that, drafting him in the third round, wasn't a wasted pick, So I like when guys are motivated, especially talented guys.
Well, and it's been interesting for us, and Sean, you watch the team closely, and what you're doing with Yahoo and where you've been around as a journalist since your playing days. There was a string of about 3 years in a row when it was a double whammy. We sure as hell couldn't stop a screenplay on defense. No matter what we did, we could put 24 men on the field. We couldn't stop a screen. And then on the other side, it was impossible for us to run it, even though our defense saw it so often. We should have plenty of scouting film. We should have known exactly how to run a screen. Now, this team runs the screenplay pretty damn well. It's a nice little counter that we have an option to run. Now, additionally, offensively, and then I want to talk to you about Atlanta. You said you like the quarterback. What would you like to see Jameis improve on with the few games we have left in the season in order for this to be one of those seasons where you think, okay, this kid did what he could do this year?
I think he's exceeded even my expectations.
And you're an asshole.
Yeah,
and I mean that affectionately.
Really, well, I'm just honest.
Yeah,
I try to be objective, and fair, but I tell, the fans, what I feel is the truth, regardless if I think they're going to like it or dislike it, but I think the turnaround he made mid-season, when he's turning the ball over, and to be able to right that ship in the middle of a season, especially in an environment where we're trying to win games, I mean, that's super impressive. I mean, you just don't see that a lot of times in young quarterbacks. What can he improve on? He can improve on everything. I mean, he's still a young guy. He can get better with his timing, with his footwork, his decision-making, his ball location. But overall, I mean, he's been outstanding.
It is a very interesting feeling as a Buck fan to walk into this and be this excited. And what I didn't expect to happen this year, though obviously you're always excited about it, was the discussion of playoffs. Even with the way we've shit the bed at a 24-0 lead in Washington and walked away from wins with New York and walked away from this win, right? What are your thoughts with regards to people talking about playoffs, other than the fact that it's exciting because we can mathematically talk about it? Do you think it's real in your eye? And then let's pull it back from playoff talk to next week in Atlanta. What do you think the Bucs are going to do?
Well, I like it because it creates an expectation, for the young guys.
Sure.
You know, I love when young guys come into a pressure-packed environment where they realize, right as rookies, that winning and losing matters. You know, that we're fighting for something, that every game, you know, for us to reach our objective and goal, we got to show it with our best, you know, and our most prepared, you know, performance. You know, I think said earlier this week on the radio that, you know, that's, I think, what the fan base should understand from Indy is hopefully we learned a valuable lesson because we didn't show up as a prepared group, like as a group that understood to win this game we had to be at our best. We showed up, you know, kind of like, okay, we had arrived. And we won a couple of games. We were feeling ourselves, you know, people talking about playoffs, you know, and that's a hard transition to go from a team that hadn't won to a team that initially had success. You know, how do you sustain that success? So, you know, hopefully, you know, we got a glimpse, you know, as a team into, okay, the level that you have to be at every week, you know, to be successful. You know, as far as Atlanta goes, you know, Atlanta's a perfect example. You know, Atlanta's a talented team. You know, Atlanta's a team that's capable of beating anybody, but they're also learning that they're capable of losing to anybody when they don't show up with their best. And they're going through some transitions. You know, Dirk Cutter, who was outstanding there with that offense, is now here in Tampa, thank God. And I think it's Kyle Shanahan is the interim, or not the interim, but the new OC, you know, along with a new head coach. And, you know, they're learning. They're trying to learn new systems. They're trying to, you know, transition talent to production, you know, to scoring, you know, and they hadn't always been able to get that done, especially the last couple of weeks. So just like the two opponents before this, I think this is a very winnable game if we show up with our best.
Now, we had another question come in from the chat room. I want to make sure I get to you, and then I want to let you have a chance to tell people where they can get more of you because, you know, like I said, I've enjoyed you on the radio for a long time before. Down by a yard, our default is to go no huddle, line up, and at least show that threat, right? You may get them to call a timeout. There's a bunch of good things that can happen. And if they leave the gaps open, you take the sneak, you go ahead and you make the first down, and you're not going to get killed by the extra guys that got stuffed into the A gap because we don't want to hurt our quarterbacks, obviously. Now, Sean, can you tell the folks who are listening here where they can get your content? I know you're still doing a lot of work all around. You're not traveling as much now, though, which is good for the family. But tell them where they can get your content.
Well, first of all, let me apologize. I know I got the kids tonight. Two of them are sick, and so sorry if it wasn't perfect conditions. But always on Twitter at Real Sean King, and I do college and NFL football for Yahoo Sports. So you can go to yahoosports.com and type in Sean King, and you'll get a whole bunch of valuable information, whether it's college, NFL, fantasy football, whatever. We kind of do all the platforms.
Well, it's good stuff. As always, Sean, I've really appreciated it's funny as a fan growing up, and Cheryl and I talk about, Spen and I talk about this all the time. One of the things this podcast has done, this is our 10th season now, is given us a chance to get to know some of the guys that we got to cheer for on the field. And it's weird when it goes from the cheer for the guys on the field to maybe see them at an event once in a while and get an autograph to having a beer with them and to doing some podcasts. So you've always been great to work with. I've always appreciated when you come on the show. And so we're going to probably try and bother you more often if we can since you live about 15 minutes from the house.
That's cool. Thanks, man. You guys have a great night.
All right, man. Take care, Sean.
All right.
Sean King, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, I don't want to look like I'm kissing his ass too bad because that's not really my style, but I will tell you this. The guy does work hard, and sometimes you may not like the things he says, but he rarely says it without having some backup. Now, we have talked from a quarterback sneak perspective about that very scenario before. The Buckshot, you're terrible. The quarterback sneak with the silent snap is one of the things we have talked about before. Now, let's talk a little bit more. And I've got the penalty data. I'm going to show you guys. I don't know if you know where this site is. I wonder if I can drop it in there with our super dope new Where did it go? Did I lose it? Maybe I'll put it over. Oh my gosh, I don't even know where it went. I lost my my super dope penalty deal. I'll find it for you guys. Give me a second, because I know that people gripe a lot about the penalties, and I was going to go through the game book. You guys know that I do this, and pull out all the penalties and do some analysis and blah blah blah. But instead, I found out that some other asshole had built a website on it, and there you go. I just dropped it into the chat room, and you guys can take a look at that and peruse at your will. You can search by player, by call, by year, and really start digging in, because when people talk about penalties, I think that largely it falls into a lot of the broad spectrum discussion of football that happens. We don't run the ball effectively, or we can't stop the slant. These things that may have a root or foundation in truth, but you've got to really start peeling back layers of the onion to find out how substantiated they are, and hopefully find some root cause. But let's talk again about Indy. I didn't get a chance to go over this again with Sean on the phone, but you guys heard me talk a little bit about it, I think, in the post-game thing that I threw up on YouTube after the Indy game. And before, when a team transitions from hoping they win to expecting to win, it's a very dangerous, precarious time. It's important. It's very, very important, because you've got to get to the point, like Sean alluded to, where you are imposing your will. That doesn't mean arrogant or cocky or any of those things, though you can have those things, and some people even like those things. That's fine. But like when Sean was talking about, it wasn't about getting in the right position. It's about executing the play. Yeah, there's a chance that you could line up for a jet sweep or whatever happens to be, and they could have the perfect defense called. But if you look at a team like the Patriots, or like the Packers when they're on their game, or the Steelers, they don't necessarily care. They're going to execute their play, because every play has a design. And it may come down to making one guy miss in the gap. Guess what? It's on the ball carrier at that time. But you've got to get to the point where every player knows that it's their job to get that job done. We looked a little bit like that in the beginning, in the first half. And hey, Josh, in the chat room, I don't know why we keep having people flip-flop back from guest to their named thing. If you could ask folks what's going on, that seems odd. I think we've got people who they're not able to keep sticky with their avatars. Anyway, in the first half, though, we couldn't get the 7s. We got the 3s, and that's one of our milestones that we have talked about before, that we've got to get 7 and not 3. We tackled fairly well, I thought. We had some extended drives in the first half. When we started that third quarter, it was 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. It was miserable, right? And we went away from the run. And I've got to go back and listen to Dirk Cutter's press conference. I don't know if you guys listened to his press conference. I've heard that it's great. Mark Cook from prereport.com loves them. Why we went away from that is beyond me. I know that the defense came out with some different style, but it doesn't matter. We've run against 8-man box. We've run against 9-man box. And by the way, it doesn't matter. It does not matter, because Jameis can check out of the run, right? This is one of those things where, from an offensive perspective, we talked about it for quite some time now. The way things are working right now, as long as we're in a basic personnel package, we can show that run, and if they go single high and creep another man in the box, Jameis just checks out and goes to whatever the wide side of the field is. It really doesn't have to be overcomplicated. Now, if you look at that penalty site that I threw in there, you can go ahead and do that, Josh. If you look at the penalty side there, one of the problems we saw this week that we haven't seen in a while is the offensive line giving up a lot of pressure. We need Ali Marpet back, and I know that Kurt put the injury list in the chat room. I'm scrolling up to see what that is. We've got the Bucks. Let's see where Ali is. Some odd scrolling here. I don't see it immediately. There he is. I can't tell whether Marpet looks like he was full participation. That's good for us. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, will you, Kurt? But it looked like it. I couldn't tell with the scroll, though. We got to get that offensive line to feel good up again and get Jameis to feel good again and take this lesson and move forward. Now, as we move forward to the game in Atlanta, as I mentioned before, it is not about what the other team does. Now, Atlanta has a ton of talent, but they're not playing particularly well. They're reeling. But when we look at the rankings, the overall rank, we're 9th overall in offense. They're 5th overall in offense. Pass offense rank, we're 26th in pass offense. They're 6th, right? Ryan's going to throw the ball. He's got Julio. He's going to throw the ball all over the damn field. Run offense, though, we are 3rd in run offense to 15th. In scoring, we're only 4 apart, 14 and 18. This is a surprisingly even matchup when you look at the differences. And what's funny about this to me is, like, receiving yards per attempt. I don't know who do you think leads in receiving yards per attempt? Because I'm going to tell you before the buffer wears out, because I don't want to wait. We do. 13.1 yards per attempt versus 11.2. I would not have guessed that. On the defensive side, we're a very evenly ranked group, with the exception of scoring. We are 25th in scoring, and they are 13th. Other than that, there's a 2-point differential side to side. It doesn't matter. This is an evenly matched game. Now, why did I give you all of that preamble and that build-up? Because these are the days, ladies and gentlemen, when the Buccaneers have to come into Raymond James Stadium and determine that the margin of error, as Coach Lovie Smith said, is gone. You have got to win out. I said it last week. We were already in the playoffs. Guess what? We lost in the first round. Ain't that a bitch? Well, it turns out it must be double elimination, right? Because you have a chance to come in front of your home field, your home fans, who are going to be wearing your gorgeous creamsicle orange, and beat a team that your fans hate, a division rival. Again, take more of a distancing position in an important tiebreaker against a team that's not playing particularly well. Buckshot's making a comment about the left to right reading. It scrolled over. That's the only reason it was a problem. It looked like it was Ali Marpet, and it was doing 7 things at the same time. So, Buckshot, I think, what's the technical term for you can lick my balls? I can't remember. We came up with a code word for that. Ali Marpet, ankle full participation, like I said, even though I was making fun of that. And yes, Brian, you have correctly identified Buckshot is, in fact, the hidden penis in the room, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, he's not hidden. He's always a penis, but we love him anyway. So Ali Marpet coming back would be phenomenal. Now, what are the keys to the game going to be? The same keys they were the last 4 weeks. Tackle. When we rally the ball, you got to get the guy on the ground. Extend drives on offense. We did it in the first half and we led. We didn't do it in the second half and we lost. You know what happens when you extend drives? There's a higher likelihood you're going to get points, either 3 or 7. Guess what the third point is? 7, not 3. You've got to get 7, not 3. And there's just no goddamn excuse for that. So let's, and we didn't do this with Sean on the phone because I know he had his son there, so I didn't want to belabor this point. We did not talk about who your skulls and swords were for last week, so drop those in the chat room, and I'll make sure I get those conveyed here. I'll tell you who mine were. And this is going to be without hearing a press conference. It's important, so I will caveat it that way. For the podcast, people are going to give me shit. My sword is going to go to Doug Martin because I'm going to continue to give him the sword as long as he rushes for around 100 yards and runs as hard as he is. I don't give a shit what happens. Listen, I'm a huge Jameis fan at this point. Kurt, I give you all the credit in the world. You were on Jameis's nuts way before anyone else was. This kid has impressed the hell out of me. I love everything I see from him. I cannot get enough. But I have a running back on this team who gets me 4-ish yards a carry, runs hard, doesn't usually put the ball on the ground, can catch, can pick up blitzes, and gets me 100 yards a game. He's getting the skull or the sword every goddamn week. The reason I'm giving my skull to our genius offensive coordinator, who I love, by the way, guys, don't take this the wrong way. I am a huge fan of Dirk Cutter. He is probably the single biggest change we made this season, including Jameis Winston, guys. You don't turn your back on that running back that I just talked about. You just don't. There's no need to. You don't have to force the other bullshit. And that's okay. And we'll learn from it. And it'll be just fine. So in the chat room, we got Buckshot with a skull to pass D and a sword to the run D. Even though he is so intimately familiar with our process, he insists on breaking the rules, and that's okay. Because we love him. He says field goals can lick his balls, especially when we miss one of them. Yeah, I know. That sucked. And it wasn't even a Finkel's Einhorn. Einhorn's Finkel. Christopher Oxendine says skull to Mike Evans, sword to Doug Martin. The Mike Evans drops is ridiculous. And whoever posted that picture of Mike looking at the lights while the ball hit him in the nuts, that was a great capture, whoever got that particular image. Now, predictive MVP and score for this week while we round things out and talk about the rest of what we're going to face this week. You know, against Atlanta, it's one of those things where we've lost to these guys by a lot of points before. They've got the firepower to do it. When I look at their injury situation, which Kurt did post, and somehow the formatting worked well for that one, You look at who's out. Devontae Freeman out, limited participation. Who knows if he'll play? Hankerson doesn't scare me, doesn't matter. There's nothing. They're not losing anyone there. That's for sure. Ryan Winfrey over in the chat room. Skull to Evans, sword to Martin. Good to see Ryan in the chat room. I hear you weren't having to work tonight, so you could join the show. It's good to have you over here. You've been busting your ass at the tailgate, man. Much appreciated. A special shout out actually to our tailgate crew. I mentioned the tailgate earlier. What's up, King Brutal? Haven't seen you in forever. A big shout out to our tailgate crew. Our pitmaster, our chef, pitmaster Pat Dunn.
Ooh, tell Dr. Cole he should try the meatloaf.
He says you should try the meatloaf.
I have. It's very good.
Thank you.
Did you ever get that scan I sent you?
Did you get a scan?
I suggest physical therapy to be safe.
He recommends therapy.
Physical therapy.
Physical.
She just had a physical.
She just had one.
One what?
I'd like to make it.
It happens so often, you almost get used to it.
We got this.
Which is why being put first takes some getting used to.
Nationwide is on your side.
Nationwide is the exclusive insurance partner of Plenty.
Christine and Aaron, and I don't mean to not name folks because everyone's busting their ass, but it's been phenomenal seeing everyone pick up the pieces and make sure this Hall of Fame tailgate continues. Now, I will continue to sing their praises as at the games as well. And Kurt, I don't mean to slight you because you're the coordinator of all of this stuff and you keep everything on track. So big shout out to the entire team that makes that happen, and Jackie and Ed and the whole group. Like I said, we've got a crew of about 24 official and about 35 to 40 that are unofficial that make that stuff happen. So it's phenomenal. So predictive MVPs, you can drop them in the chat room. Revfish has a skull to the pass rush and a sword to Doug Martin. And he's apparently had some problems with the site that he'll talk to Josh Wobbles about. Predictive MVPs this week. Who do we want to see show up? You're not going to be surprised by who I'm going to pick. It's Doug fucking Martin. Predictive MVP on offense is Doug Martin, and I'm going to continue to pick him. I'm going to continue to pick him until someone proves to me that they can stop this little guy from running. And I swear to God, and it's funny, you don't want to overpay for anyone, but pay this man his money. The guy's doing great work. Get him a fair contract. I have every faith in the world that Jason Light and the team are going to give this kid a contract, and we're going to have Doug Martin for a long time, as long as you ever have a running back. Right? Remember, there's a limited shelf life on running backs that aren't superhuman. On the defensive side of the ball, what's going to be the magic? What's going to happen? Now, you guys know I like picking Alteron Werner. I think he's the X factor, but I think it's going to be pass rush style. I think that this week is going to be Gerald McCoy's week. I think it's a multiple sack week this week, and I think G-Mac is going to show up again. We haven't heard people trying to cut him and trade him and bench him and all that shit like they do anytime he doesn't have 16 sacks in the game, which was nice to hear. But I think it's going to be G-Mac, and I do think the Bucs get a win, and I do think they get a decent size win. I think it's going to be a 24 to 13 win this week is what I'll go ahead and ink down here. 24 to 13 is the number with Doug Martin and Gerald McCoy. So go ahead and let me know your predictive MVPs. I'm going to do some housekeeping here at the back end, and then we will get out of here. Can you give your skull to Quan for next week for getting suspended? You can. It's funny. I haven't heard a whole lot else about that. The only stuff that I'd heard was the same scuttle. You guys heard there was an energy drink. You guys heard my rant or tirade on that. ASJ still in the build. I have not heard that he's going to play as of yet. We had the link that was put up here. What's up with ASJ on the injured list? Shoulder, limited participation. Looks like the same as it has been throughout this process, which means he's got to be able to handle contact, right? That's the trick. He's got to be able to protect himself when he's in the game. But to be honest, with the way Cameron Brate's playing, unless he's perfectly healthy and safe, man, I don't want him on the field anyway. Cam Brate's playing a good game. Is ASJ different? Yes, physically he's very different. He gives us a matchup nightmare. But I think that Cam Brate's going good. Chris Rockstein, MVP on offense. Charles Sims. Oh, look at the dark horse candidate. I like it. And on defense, another dark horse. Hojo. Howard Jones. I think he got a sack last week too. This defensive line got some sacks last week. They got some pressure. They've got to do it without having to bring extra people. The linebackers, like I mentioned earlier, have got to get to their depth if we're going to play zone. I'm hoping that we don't play a tremendous amount of zone, even going against Julio Jones and Roddy White and that crew down there. We have got to be willing to take those risks and make Matt Ryan beat us, right? You've got to get your hands up in the passing lanes, get those tips, and have an opportunity to get the turnovers. Lovie Smith said it very well. You don't often win if you don't have turnovers. So, sincere question. What's so different about the defense that makes you think we give up only 13 after they moved up and down the field on us? Can't count all those turnovers twice. I hope you're right. So here's the thing. I don't carry one game to the next when it comes to defense. The 25 points that they put up don't impress me. Short fields, things like that. It's not something I think you convey 1 week to the next. This defense is capable of doing just what other defenses do, shutting people out. We put up 40-something points on the Eagles, and we could only put up what we put up against Indianapolis. That doesn't make any sense, right? It's not like there's a natural, and I take it as sincere, Rev. I don't take it as a bad or as a rude or pointed question in that regard. Our safety play has got to get better. Gil Bird and that team has got to get our safeties to be in position. If we're going to play cover 2, whether it's a traditional cover 2 or a Tampa 2 where you're three across in the safety position, Murphy's done, knee, end of the year. The safeties have got to get to position. The cornerbacks and the safeties have to work in concert. If you're going to pass off your guy to your safety, the safety's got to know that. He's got to get in position. Otherwise, it's just playing 7-on-7. Now, why are we still figuring that out? Because we've had so many injuries and shuffling of the lineup and this sort of thing. That creates depth, but it doesn't create continuity. We're not there yet. We're getting closer. Getting closer each week. And when I pick scores, I'm not a Vegas guy. I'm not putting money on this shit. I'm too smart to put money on sports. I'm just going with gut reads, and that could be a fat joke if you want to make it one. But yeah. Buckshot on the predictive offensive MVP. Whoever's playing across from Claiborne. Oh, that's brutal. It's one thing not to be a huge Claiborne guy. It's another thing to be a dick. I love Adrian. Good person. Better person than many I know. Heck of a player. He seemed to be doing pretty well in Atlanta. I miss him. I wish he was here. I would take his edge rush over some of the guys we have. He certainly could set the edge. That was not an issue. Animal in the chat room. What does Alexander hope to accomplish in appealing the suspension? I don't see the league giving any leniency to him. I suspect the best thing he hopes for is enough doubt that they would move the suspension to another hearing or whatever the hell in the off season. But I think it's just sort of normal procedure. You don't want to just admit that you did it wrong. You follow the pattern. Well, I don't know how many of the drink words I hit. I know I said sack a number of times. I don't know what the other one was. I can't remember the Code Rum drink words, but hopefully you guys had some good drinks, had a good time for the show. If you are listening to this in the podcast, please do make sure you rate us on iTunes. Let us know if there's other ways we can get to you. Josh Wobbles is doing some great stuff over here for the technology to make things easier for everyone to see the podcast, whether it be live on Thursday or on Wednesday nights, or whether it be via the podcast format. I know that Chris over at Bucks Brief likes Mixlr as an audio-only stream. We may want to do that as well. Wobble says, it depends on what he tested positive for, which is true. Buckshot says defensive MVP Moore makes up for last week. 2 picks on passes Julio's way. I would love to see that. Now, Buckshot brings up a good point before I end up. One of the things that I loved about what Moore did against Dez Bryant, he was very physical. They let him get into his kitchen and really kind of rough it up, and that's what you've got to do against these big receivers. Now, Julio Jones is a beast, an absolute beast, but that's what you've got to do. You've got to take your chances with these guys, and if he's going to catch for 300 yards, that's okay if no one else does shit and you get him off the field. But sitting back in a soft zone doesn't do anything for us because we're not getting the tips, we're not getting the turnovers. Now, you certainly do mix things up. You don't want to try and play man all the time and be crazy. And with the way the Bucks are gang tackling and stripping, you can get some turnovers if you're keeping everything in front of you. But you've got to mix those things up. You've also got to slip in some interesting pieces. We've talked about it before. The zone blitz is something we don't have anymore. I suspect that's because of how wrecked we've been in the defensive end position. There's just no continuity between Jacquez Smith and Will Golston and whoever else we got playing on that DN positions. It's just not been good. So, all right. Well, for the What the Buck crew, I think we've covered enough this evening. I know that I'm tired. Real life is interceded. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Take advantage of that penalty shot or that penalties website. I'll put that in the post for this week's podcast as well, so you guys can check that out. Keep an eye out for Patches articles. Follow us on Periscope at WhatTheBuc, on Twitter at WhatTheBuc, on YouTube at youtube.com/user/WhatTheBuc. And we'll try and get everything done in this next week with Josh and I to get us back on the live simulcast. I know we got a little bit more of a delay than we would like here. So for myself and for the entire What the Buck crew, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. And we are out of here.
What's up, boy? What up, boy? Man, intro dumb old man. I gotta get this thing done, man. Old school, and on my head about this thing, boy. know we gotta get in here and talk about these Buccaneers. I got the beat. You got the beat, then I got that word. Let's get it then. There goes my